Hi everyone, I'm Jim, and it's my job to provide fast, effective relief from the heartburn of people problems. Today I'm going to be talking about job applications, and specifically CVs, curriculum vitae. Now, in many parts of the world, these are called resumes, so where you hear me use the term CV, I mean resume, just supplant one word for the other. Right, the reason I'm going to talk about this is a colleague recently asked me about an article I wrote for a magazine a long time ago, which talked about this topic, so I thought I'd just quickly summarize the key points again in a short video. If you are going to apply for a job, well, here is my advice. Now, I must disclaim this by saying that there is advice and articles and videos all over the place about good job applications and what makes a good CV. So this is just my opinion. Your opinion may differ. Other people may tell you differently. If you think I'm saying something wrong, then feel free to comment below. On the other hand, if you agree with me, comment as well. Right, let's get to it. When I look at CVs, and in my years I have seen quite a lot of them, there are basically two things I'm looking for. Number one, relevance. Why are we interesting to you as a candidate? What is it about us as employers that make us interesting to you? And the job in particular. And, on a related note, what is it about you as a candidate that makes you interesting to us? And the second related point is don't be boring. And by boring, I mean a lot of people, when they apply for a job, they send no cover letter, they send no personal statement, they just basically send a list. At the top, there's the name and contact information, and then there is a chronographically ordered list of jobs and what they did at school and what certificates they got, their bronze swimming certificate, the badges they got at scout camp and all the rest of this stuff. It's really not relevant. It's only really relevant when you're sort of shortlisting a little later. On the initial sift, when I'm going through that list, I want to find out who is the most relevant, worth looking at a little more closely. And a dry list, that doesn't usually get much attention. So it's a really good idea to have something at the start of your CV, whether it's a covering letter or just a couple of paragraphs, that explains why you're really interested in this role. What is it about the employer that's interesting to you? How is it relevant to your career aspirations, the direction that you're going in, the journey that you're on, something like that. And then don't forget to talk about why you are interesting as a candidate. What is it about you, your skills, your background, your interests specifically that makes you an interesting candidate, someone that we should look more closely at? Some people, a lot of people, they just rely on that list of prior employment and their qualifications to do the talking for them. That, I think, is a mistake, because it is very, very hard to stand out from the crowd. Now, it is true that there are some employers that have very strict criteria. You know, we only take people with first degrees, or we only take people who come out of an Oxbridge University background and that sort of thing. I personally disagree with that approach. I think that's really the wrong way of doing it. I think that's hiring vanity, quite frankly. There are great people who don't necessarily have first degrees and didn't necessarily come from an Oxbridge background, and I think employers are missing a trick by overlooking those folks. But anyway, some people do that. You might want to ask yourself if you really want to work in a culture where that sort of thing is important. I personally wouldn't, but each to their own. Yes, so be relevant about why you're important, worthy of consideration to the employer, and why the employer on the job is interesting to you. Then by all means get into all the rest of this stuff. Now, when you do your CV, people tend to wind the clock all the way back. In fact, when it comes to things like qualifications, the most important is typically whatever the highest level of education that you reach. So if you have a degree, talking about GCSEs and O-levels and your drama certificate from primary school, this is not relevant. It really isn't really relevant. Also, when you're doing your CVs, don't try to dazzle my eyes with lots of decoration, lots of different fonts and colored headings and stuff like that. Over decorating a CV just makes it a little bit tiresome to read. Bear in mind that, and always think like this as well, when you're writing a CV, always think that your CV is going to be one in a long sequence that's going past somebody's eyeballs. Now, the problem there is that might lead you to think that you need to make it jump out and have all of these bells and whistles and decorations, but actually that's not the case. The thing that's going to make it jump out is relevance. Why are you relevant as a candidate? This is the most important thing. This is what we're looking for. And it's literally the first, maybe even 10 or 15 seconds, and it's going to go into one or two piles, right? If the person looking at your CV when it's received can't very quickly see why you're worth looking more closely at and having a conversation with, you're going to go onto the discard pile. So just think about that when you're putting it together. Other things to avoid on CVs, please don't put your photograph. And this seems to be more common in various parts of the world. It seems to be like a custom and practice in some places, but it's really not a good idea to do. There are issues around potential discrimination, and I'm not just talking about things like race. There's also something called the horns and halo effect. This is a prejudice that a lot of people are psychologically vulnerable to, which is you see an attractive, by whatever your own standards of attractiveness are, you see an attractive face, and there's a tendency to assume this is a good person, this is somebody I want to meet, this is somebody I want to talk to. Bear in mind, this is not a conscious bias, this is unconscious. So it is very easy to say, well, people shouldn't be doing that, people should be judging it purely on its merits, but you cannot discount subconscious biases. You could be the most righteous candidate in the world, but if you stick out photographs and you invite all of these unconscious biases to have a bearing on your application, you're not really doing yourself any favors. So it's best to leave photographs off. Your visual facial appearance should have no bearing on your application. So rather than expecting the person looking at the CV to disregard your photograph, just don't bother putting it on there in the first place. Okay, when it comes to doing the opening statement, as well as even in the chronology of all the things that you've been doing, make sure you're tailoring it to the job you're applying for. Another big mistake people make is to have one CV and they just mail it out in bulk to everybody. Everybody gets exactly the same application. That might sound reasonable because it's the same person applying, but we all have elements of things that we've done in our roles and in our history that will be more relevant to certain roles than to other roles. I mean, I've worked in software, I've done people management, HR and things like that. So if I was applying for an HR role in a software development company, then I'm going to make sure that I'm pulling out those facets of my history which are relevant to that culture and that environment. And you should do the same. Tailor and tweak your CV and the opening statement or covering letter so that it's highlighting the parts of you and your history that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. Don't just send the same application to everybody. Right, let's see, is there anything else I need to cover with CVs? No, I think that's it. If you can get it right, if you can get the reader's attention within the first 10, 15, 20 seconds, you've got a much better chance of getting an interview. And always remember, your CV gets you the interview, but it's your attitude that gets you hired, your attitude at the interview. So we'll probably do something on interviews maybe a little bit later. The CV has one job, and it's to get you into a conversation with the person making a hiring decision. That's it. It doesn't have any other purpose. So make sure it's fit for purpose. If you would like some advice on this, it's not really something that I do as a service, so this was just sort of a by-the-by video thing. There's lots of stuff online. But do put your thoughts in the comments. If there's some interesting feedback there, maybe we'll pick up on a few of those in a future video. All right, well, hope this was useful anyway, at least a bit of a conversation starter. Have a great day, and I'll catch up with you soon. Bye. Cheers.